Welcome everyone to the Emergent Essence Dynamics webinar on November 6th. And our theme today is Listening with the Quantum Mind. We have today joining us Miriam and Christina, and more may join. We're not sure. Several people signed up, so we'll see if we get other people joining as we go along. So welcome. So just from the title, I'm sure you read the description when you were registering. So what drew you into this webinar, or what are some specific things you're hoping that you can explore? I'd just love to hear from each of you briefly, and then we'll get into the meat of the whole presentation.
Well, I joined the Berlin Change Days last weekend.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I missed your workshop.
Okay.
And everyone I talked to who came out of your workshop was blown away. They just loved the content.
Awesome.
And I'm very interested in the art of listening. And I just had an interview for my podcast with Oscar Pugmboli from Australia on deep listening.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm interested to explore what listening with the quantum mind actually means.
Awesome. Yes. Yeah, that presentation at the Berlin Change Days over the weekend was opening the quantum space, creating fluidity and resilience in relationships. So this will be a slightly similar presentation, but more with an emphasis on the listening, how listening changes when we enter a quantum space, what's available. And also, we'll get into some specific skills on creating the fluidity and resilience in the relationship. And next month's webinar will focus much more on building and restoring resilience in relationships. So you may also want to join next month. So it's like this month and next month go together in a way, okay? Great. Christina, how are you, and what would you like to take from the webinar?
Hi, good evening. Sorry for not being able to turn my camera. I wasn't able to hear you at the beginning of your intervention, but I was missing you because I haven't heard you for a long time.
Yeah.
And the topic with listening, which is coming all over the place on me, because even I believe on myself that I'm listening, and sometimes I hear after 2 or 3 days what the other person told me.
Okay.
Listening, it's the greatest skill I want to have and to help others to develop.
Okay. Excellent. Great. So we are focusing on these two aspects, listening, and I'll explain how EED looks at an expanded sense of listening, all right? Which goes beyond deep listening, beyond active listening. So it even goes beyond whole body listening. So we'll explain that in a bit. And then we will look at what do we mean by quantum mind, all right? It's more like a quantum consciousness or a quantum mind, but what we really mean is it's just going beyond thinking in black and white, either or. That's very simply what we mean there, okay? Great. Okay, so let's move forward into what we're discovering. So we're going to focus on listening, perception, and interaction from fluid states of being that will go beyond our normal linear binary mindset. We're trained into this either or mindset, and it's not the only thing available, but we're not necessarily trained how to get beyond that, all right? And this is what we're looking at. It changes the way we listen, it changes the way we perceive, and then of course it changes the way we interact in relationship. We're going to explore multiple levels of awareness and consciousness, which means multiple levels of listening as well. And we're going to look at mostly this idea of a multi-dimensional brain, all right? And I'll explain that as we come to it. But I know you hear it with neuroscience, you know, left brain, right brain, but there's even more to it, okay? We're looking at like 3 dimensions here, because left and right is only 1 dimension, right? That will become clear as we go. then tips for creating a quantum experience, all right, through whole brain activation and then whole being coherence. This is where we're creating an alignment between the brain and the body and all the parts of the body, so they are very coherent and incongruent. They are aligned, congruent, and in coherence with each other. And that opens up a whole other layer of perception and intelligence when we are working with coherence, all right? Let's see if I have a fourth. I do. Simple ways to act and respond with fluidity and resilience, all right? And that will continue in the next webinar as well, along the same themes, all right? Now, we have an hour. Now, this possibly may go longer than an hour. If you can stay a little longer, great. I always have too much content in these webinars. So, and I do try to pack it in, so that means I may be moving quickly. Feel free to jump in and stop me, say back up, or ask a question, or ask for clarification, all right? Otherwise, I just go boom, 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 forward, okay? I will give you simple tips, simple tools, things that are practical for you to be able to walk away with and experiment. But in 1 hour of a webinar, I am not promising you full mastery of what I'm putting forward as a concept. And these are beyond concept. These are all trainable and doable. It just takes time, practice, and discipline. Okay? So disclaimer up front, I am not giving you a guarantee that you will be listening with the quantum mind fully 100% with full mastery after an hour, okay? This can be a lifetime of training, all right? But it's giving you the guidelines to already start training yourself, all right? All right. Sound good? Sound okay? Thumbs up? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. So before we move in, I need to explain what is emergent essence dynamics. What is EED? Now, Christina, you've been on here before. And people listening to the recording may or may have not listened to previous webinars. And so this is always part of the webinar, just to clarify, what do we mean by emergent essence dynamics? So this is a model and an approach for working with human transformation, human dynamics, change, okay? It's designed to be a universal model that will fit underneath any other methodology because it is primarily concerned with pinpointing the fundamental level of human dynamics, okay? What's driving a human being? What is driving the need for transformation, and what, in fact, is the nature of the transformational cycle? So this is what we're working with. It is fractal based, meaning everything works in patterns, in small ways and in large ways, okay? So what's happening at the micro level is also happening in the macro or bigger level. And so this, in a way, well, this does improve your speed, precision in working with transformation, especially in working with complexity, because it can simplify complexity through recognizing the fractals that are happening. So it's actually simplicity that is able to deal with complexity. So you as a facilitator or as a coach or as a leader or as a mediator, if you're working with conflict, you're going to get so much variation out there, but we've trained you how to look through that and find what are the core patterns at work. And you don't even need to look at the root cause of something. You're looking more at what's the root pattern, all right? And this means this pattern is happening everywhere in small ways and big ways. So therefore, once you've harnessed that pattern and you can start shifting it or reconciling the pattern, it will shift itself, and then it shifts multiple issues at once, simultaneously. So that is why it increases your speed and precision, all right? Because you're not tangled up in the details. You don't even need the details. You just need to see the patterns. Now, we're not actually concerned with transformation. Before transformation happens, we're working at restoring resilience, well-being, and autonomy. That will become clearer as I go along in this presentation, why we stress this. If we are fixed on transformation, we might be creating false transformation or aggravating more resistance to change. When we go to resilience first, then 98% of the resistance falls away, and then you'll have your core patterns that remain that actually need to be reconciled through resilience, well-being, and autonomy. And then there is a liberation that happens, all right? Because we're reconciling patterns with our essence and our ego. We're reconciling identity and essence, basically, because many times the identity or personality is trying to drive the transformation, and that's driven by fear and reactivity. Once you've reconnected someone with their inner source, all potential, infinite awareness, or essence, or higher mind, whatever you want to call it, there's a sense of timelessness, a sense of permanence. There's no need then to rush into a transformation or to fear what they're experiencing. And so when we're reconciling ego and essence, nothing is taboo, and therefore they have more agility and liberation within themselves. So what we're really doing is transmutation. We're not adding or deleting anything. It is more restoring the resilience, creating a connection to the source, bringing that back out into what's happening in the world, and maintaining that connection to source so that more and more the person, the group, or the situation is a more pure expression from source as opposed to a distortion of what's trying to be expressed from source. So this is more an alchemical process. So this can apply to coaching, leadership, mediation, facilitation, healing, and beyond. It can be even to dating and sales and cooking and whatever you're in relationship with. This is what it's working with, all right? Any questions or comments on that? I usually present this a different way every time using the same talking points. So what are your reactions to just looking at what is EED?
Every time I'm hearing you presenting what is EED, it seems like, okay, it's something magical. I do not really understand what you are talking about, but I do recognize a lot of what you are talking about. So yeah, it's known and unknown, and one day I will manage to to understand it properly.
Yes, and what I can add to it is, for what seems like magic, EED deconstructs that into something tangible and practical. So another way to look at EED is things that seem invisible or I can't quite grasp it, makes it graspable, meaning you can what seems invisible now becomes visible. All right, like we're making invisible processes much more obvious. Okay, because we're opening your eyes to it. Does that help, or does that make sense, Christina?
Yes, of course. Yes, it has a lot of sense. This is helping a lot.
Okay, great. It's like having another level of technology in communication that is beyond our normal way of being. Anything else you want to add or say, Miriam?
Yeah, I must say I struggle a little bit to follow. And I do understand that you're trying to bring something intangible, like almost spiritual, into maybe a tangible, manageable framework. Yeah. So now I'm just curious to see how you unfold that.
I will unfold it. It will clarify itself as we go along more and more. All right. Yes. Yeah, so think of it as it makes the intangible more tangible. It makes what seems intuitive, concrete, and pragmatic. All right, so as you learn EED more and more and more, what you used to think was intuition now becomes logic in a way. Then that leaves you room for even higher intuition that goes well beyond what you're used to. Okay, so what is quantum? Now, I'd love to hear from your ideas on what your perceptions of quantum are, or what you believe it means. And I'll show you what I'm highlighting here around what is quantum to work with listening and interacting, all right, and consciousness work. So just love to hear from you. What is quantum? What do we mean by this? Because there's quantum physics, and then there's quantum consciousness, and now it's a buzzword. Everyone's using quantum this and that and that and that, all right? So I'm using it more like a metaphor, all right?
So what I understand by it is a jump from one state into another state that is actually not really explainable. So we cannot observe it, we cannot really measure it. It happens, but it seems like magic.
Excellent. Awesome. Yeah. What else comes to mind when you're thinking quantum? Christina or Miriam? If you don't have anything, you can say that's it. You know, that's, you know. So those are well, my first 3 points here. So quantum is accessing all potential, and it embraces simultaneous possibilities at once. So if you think quantum functioning as a wave, it's a wave of all possibilities. And then once we observe something, it crystallizes into one of those possibilities. It can collapse back, and then it can become another possibility, right? So it's embracing the all potential as well as having a concrete reality at the same time. So what we're using that here around is, depending on how we listen, we can go back into the all potential, and then we can start to have an alchemical process to produce a different possibility, all right? In our concrete world, we can't change the concrete stuff. We have to go back into collapsing into that wave of potential. How do you access that? That is the question we're going to look at and answer. So that actually what EED is doing is toggling back and forth between what's all potential and what is crystallized reality or concrete, all right? If we try to shift things from the concrete level on the concrete level, it's very, very hard to change because it is rigid, all right? Because it's embracing simultaneous possibilities, that means it can embrace opposites at once, meaning paradox, okay? So hot and cold can coexist at the same time and be the same thing, to be very simple about it. The other thing you mentioned, Miriam, is it's levels of complexity move in set platforms and levels. It's not a gradual increase or decrease of information. It's when you're on one level, it's a set level of multiplicity of information. And then when you move to another level, it's automatically another fixed or set number of possibilities that geometrically increases or decreases. Okay, so it's not gradual. It's what's called quantized. That's what they mean when they say quantum leap. All right. So what that means here is that things are immediate. This means transformation does not have to be perceived as gradual. It is immediate. When we hit another level, there is immediate shifts that happen, all right? And then we just need to sustain the level. So again, this is why we don't push for transformation, because when we shift levels, everything is shifting, all right? And it is holographic and fractal, meaning, again, there's a sense of wholeness, and everything is interrelated and interacting and affecting each other, and everything is working through patterns, all right? If you shift the pattern, you shift the substance, basically, all right? So that we're not changing people, we're actually changing the space in between, the relationships. How the relationship is functioning determines how the people are behaving, all right? And then how the people are behaving contribute to the dynamic in between. And we go back and forth. All right. But the real shift is shift the relationship, not the person. Now, a person can be in relationship with themselves, with another person or thing. They can be in relationship with their world, and they can be in relationship with time. And on the quantum level, we are going beyond fixed linear time. past, present, future. It embraces all states of time. So it is basically outside of time or beyond time, however you want to express it, but there's a sense of timelessness and permanence, all right? And when we start hitting these quantum states of being, the person does experience time shifts or timelessness, all right? Any comments or questions there on what we're talking about here? Okay, great. Again, this is why we say transformation is instant. You can have instant intimacy. You can have instant connection. It doesn't take time. And the other thing is, because it's fractal, both the problem and solution are always available, and they're embedded and entangled together. So right from the beginning of your coaching session or your workshop, or when you go into team build, both the problem and the solution are constantly present. All it means is we need to access the level where we can start unfolding and letting it reveal itself. But the solution is always there. We don't need to search for it. This is, again, why we don't push for transformation. Get to know the problem, get to know the question, because the answer is always there and it appears. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. How are you guys doing with this information? How's it going? It's okay? All right. So here are different levels of truth and relationship, all right? Now, everyone has their story. That means they have their point of view. They have their filters, their bias, they have their judgments, their opinions, their conditioning, all of that. This is my story. What it really is, it's just a singular truth. I have one slice of the pie, one little piece, all right? You have another piece, and Miriam has one piece, Christina has another piece. Collectively, we may have the whole truth, but we all only have a small slice. All right, that's if we get locked into our story and locked into our point of view. It's a singular truth. Then when you get two people together, this is called truth in opposition. We might agree, we might disagree, but it's two slices competing or comparing. All right. This is the source of conflict. This is the source of disruption, of resistance. It's when I'm trying to pull you into my truth, you're trying to pull me into your truth. I believe black is right, and you say, no, black is wrong. White is right. White is the way to be. We could do the same thing between green and red or any other thing. Or hot temperatures, we thrive best in hot climates and hot temperatures. No, no, no. We thrive best in cold temperatures. So what this is opposites, and they're constantly opposing each other, right? If we try to create transformation on the level of story and game, and we call this game because we're playing upon each other. Now, when we're in that level, it feels like life and death. But when you get off that level and can observe it, okay, from a more resilient place, it looks like a game. And it actually can become more archetypal. These are the archetypes of our human dramas. This is win, lose, compromise, conquer or be conquered. All right. Why? Because we're in a fixed, rigid position. All right. There is no fluidity between us. I'm locked in my bubble. You're locked in your bubble. So the only way we'll get along is really if we agree. This is based upon consensus. Is this making sense? The only reason is because we're living in a sealed reality. I've got other webinars that go into more detail on this, okay? Now, here's a red line, all right? So this is where, when we drop into a different kind of a space. So this is our linear binary thinking, and it's a fixed reality. Now, if we drop below that line, we're getting more into a quantum experience because we're able to be more in flow. We're willing to influence and be influenced. So this means we're opening our bubble a bit more so that we're letting things in. We're allowing us to feel affected and we don't feel threatened by change, okay? Because we're realizing more of a permanence of ourselves. I am not my bubble. I'm beyond that. I'm more than my bubble. Bubble, look at it as fixed identity or fixed personality. When we're able to loosen our grip on the fixed identity, we come into contact more with our essence, our sense of timelessness and permanence. And this is the level of source, all right? Our world does not function in the level of source, but we can certainly connect to it and pull source into our world, all right? So what I'm calling dream, because dream means it's not so fixed. It's a bit fluid. It can shift, it can change. This is where we have truth in flux. So I'm not so rigid and fixed in my truth. I can be influenced and I can expand my point of view. When I'm connecting to source, this is where there is no more bubble. This means it's a total unity. This is like the level of all potential on the quantum scale, all right? This is the whole wave, all right? So this is where we experience unified truth, okay? So what EED is doing, it's mostly functioning on this level of dream. And we can jump into the game or the story, but we're creating these shifts and transformations at the level of dream and source because this is where there's more fluidity. And then people can move back into their game level. They can take a rigid and fixed position, but this is where it gets all rearranged or transmuted from the source or dream level, all right? Most transformations take place in story and game, and this is why they meet so much resistance, or why this transformation isn't sustainable, because you're trying to, again, crush concrete with concrete. It's rigid and fixed, all right? If we can go into, like on the iPhone, our toggle mode, where you can now move your fixed apps around on the screen, we can also rearrange ourselves, rearrange our strengths, rearrange our weaknesses, and reconcile our fears, because we're in touch with the level of all potential, permanence, and timelessness. So how are you doing with this? This is delineating the difference between our fixed reality and a more fluid reality. And so the fluid reality we can call quantum experience. And this webinar is how do you listen at these levels and start interacting at these levels. So any comments, questions here?
It clarifies the way people are sticking to their stories.
Yes.
And how the conflict it's escalating because they are just sticking to their stories.
Exactly.
And they are fighting. The game is fight usually.
That's right.
It's not something else. And the magic word sentence you said, it's I'm letting you to influence me.
Exactly.
That's creating the space.
That's right.
For transformation, as you say, but not transformation, but it's not with no effort.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's magical, as you said.
It is magical, and the key to opening the bubble is cultivating resilience. It's accessing resilience. I will not open my bubble if I do not feel resilient. That's the reason I've got it closed, is for my safety, security, and protection. And this is why I'm sticking to my story, and this is why I'm fighting for my point of view, is because if I leave my identity, if I'm so fixed with it, I will cease to exist. Okay? That's why you're a threat to my reality if I'm feeling non-resilient. As soon as I'm resilient, I'm on a level where, I'm beyond my story. Maybe multiple stories can coexist. It doesn't really threaten me. This is what resilience provides. A sense of connection to something deeper than my personality, ego, or identity. Is that making sense? This is why, again, we're saying before you embark on transformation, cultivate access to resilience first, because already the ego is not clinging to a rigid point of view or reality. It starts to let go and realizes, actually, I'm okay. Therefore, I can start to let you in. This is what we call vulnerability. It is a vulnerable act to open the bubble, okay? But if I'm using my vulnerability to be a hero, or to attract attention, or to say, look how great I am, I'm starting to seek validation by showing my tears and my courage and my openness, I'm actually playing a game. Okay, that might sound controversial, or it may not. But if I'm in a true place of resilience and vulnerability, it's just, there's a natural generosity of give and receive. We'll look at that in a moment or later. And I'm not doing it to validate myself. I'm not doing it to stroke my ego. I'm actually doing it to let go of my ego a little bit more.
Yeah, it's like I am, and
Yeah.
I do not have to prove it to you.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
I just am.
That's right. That is the key symptom of being in essence or source. It is I am, or just am. Okay, nothing to do, nowhere to go, nothing to be, which means there's nothing to prove. I just am. Here I am. So therefore I can be receptive and generous at the same time. All right. Now, dream still works with opposites, but opposites here are complementary. Whereas on the game level, opposites threaten each other. They're oppositional. They're in conflict. Whereas in dream, opposites work together to provide a larger spectrum of truth and reality. That's the main difference, okay? So just to be able to move between game and dream, and this is what we mostly do in the first module of training with the EED, is train you. How do you open that bubble? How do you go back and forth between game and dream? How do you access source? How do you sustain that dream level? Because we're so conditioned to jump back up into our game and stick to our story. That is so conditioned in us, all right? It's that fluidity that enables us to be more flexible, adaptable. It gives us back our autonomy, especially when, like, once we're connected to our source, then I don't need to seek approval or permission or power from something outside myself, because I contain everything within and I access everything within. So dream and source are what can neutralize the game from escalating. It can prevent the game from escalating into disaster and destruction, right? But EED is not eliminating the game. It's just adding more levels so we can play the game more masterfully and move through suffering more efficiently, or not eliminate suffering, but use the suffering as a way to learn lessons. What really creates suffering is when we keep banging our head against the wall in the game and never learn the purpose of the game. We just keep trying to win. All right. Now this, I'm going a little bit beyond the scope of this webinar, but that's talked about in previous webinars on how we reconcile conflict. But this is central, okay? Now, I'm going to move to the next thing. It's how do you sustain this open bubble of the dream, let's say, okay? So this is part of the EED model, all right? All it's concerned with is, there's 3 loops. I'm showing you only 2 of the 3, okay? So this primary loop is our rhythm and flow. This is our back and forth in relationship. Action, response, action, response, action, response. So the first thing we're listening to is, we're not listening to words or feelings or narratives or testimonies. That's story and game. What we're looking at is we're responding, acting and responding to actions, behaviors, and energies. Energy is different than feeling, because feeling is putting a point of view on top of the energy. Whereas energy is just pure energy and motion, okay? So action, response, action, response. So it can look like observe what's over there in the person and then invite their response in how are they relating to what's happening right now. Oh, you're smiling. How is that for you? What are you feeling? This creates a back and forth engagement where I don't need to impose my truth on you, but rather I'm saying, here's what's occurring. What's your truth on Okay. Is that making sense what I'm saying?
Yes, I'm not jumping to the conclusions based on the behaviors. I'm
Nope.
just asking you, what's your truth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're nodding your head.
Yeah.
What are you experiencing? What are you thinking? What are you aware of? Because most of the time, I'm going to make something up from my story or my game, and I'm going to put that across on you. And then you're going to start reacting to it. And this is what will create more separation, because then I'm trying to project or impose my reality on you. Instead, what I'm doing is I observe what's happening, I recognize it, then I'm moving into a place of acceptance of what's happening, meaning it is what it is. Okay, and if I'm resilient, I won't feel threatened by it. I can then become more fascinated. So I want to invite your response and work from fascination, as opposed to working from a fixed judgment or the need to change. Okay, you could be crying. I could say, oh, so there's tears rolling down your face. What are you feeling? Instead of me saying, oh my God, I just upset you. What can I do about that? Do you understand? Miriam, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, it reminds me of something I heard once, that we cannot feel curious and angry at the same time, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as we switch our curious mindset on, where we observe the others and we observe our own feeling, we cannot jump into this reaction because we're angry.
Right. I want to say a couple things on that. And then this is also, we've covered this already in previous webinars, but there's a difference between curiosity and fascination. And so there's a reason why I'm using the word fascination. Curiosity can still create a barrier. I can be curious while still being protected. Okay. That means I can just say, oh, what's that? And what's that? And what's that? But don't let it touch me. Okay. Fascination opens the barrier and I throw my full self in, and I'm willing to be affected by it. Like, wow, I'm fascinated. Let me dig in the dirt with you and discover what that is. Whereas curiosity will say, oh, what's that in the dirt? Dig around in there. But I don't want to touch it yet. Okay. I want to know if it's safe to touch. Do you guys understand the difference, what I mean? So fascination, you throw your whole self into it and you're already willing to be influenced. It's because you're accepting what's going on. You're not. So this is where also curiosity can distort things. I can see what's happening and then I can say, I'm curious how that could be different. You understand? It wants to change things already. Go ahead, Christina.
For me, curiosity is like I have an intent.
Okay.
About observing.
Having an intent about observing, yes.
But fascination is just being in the flow.
Right,
with
exactly.
the observance act.
Right. So it's experiencing as opposed to observing. It's actively experiencing as opposed to passively observing. So curiosity matches more passively observing, meaning I'm observing behind glass, for example. Or I'm standing at the edge of the pool observing everyone swim and I'm so curious. Whereas if I'm fascinated, I'm jumping in the water. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. Now, so this is going to create an engine of moment to moment to moment to moment of action response. And we're going to get lots of behavior and energy generated, okay? And that's going to create the rhythm and flow of the relationship. Then the second loop is about focusing on where do we focus within those actions and responses. And we're creating a balance, or we're counterbalancing between awareness and experience. A simple way would be creating an alignment and congruency between our intelligence centers, from the head to the body experience to the emotional experience. All right, so we're integrating all of it together so the whole being is in alignment with itself. And that allows us to drop into these dream and source levels when we are totally congruent. And I'll show you next what I mean by that. So, for example, with the action, I can state what's going on. With the response, I need to invite it. The most typical way to invite a response is through a question. All right. I use the focus loop to help create my questions. It could be, oh, so you're sitting with your your arm to the side, you're leaning your head against your fist, and I could, if I want to go into awareness, I could say, what are you thinking? What are the ideas that you have right now? Or what are you aware of, right? That's going to take you into an awareness orientation. Or I could say, what are you feeling? What is it like to physically feel your fist on your head? What's it like? What's the physical experience of resting your head, right? So that's more experience, feelings, sensations, physicality. And if we counterbalance the two, then we're not overemphasizing one over the other. So we're not getting too heady or we're not getting too touchy-feely, but it's all working together. And so we're intentionally counterbalancing this. So we're creating flow and focus. So how are you guys doing with that? That's the basics of EED. The third loop is then, once we've generated all these energies, then we are able to direct the energies and flow with co-creation. So this is generating flow and alignment, and then our third loop is directing the flow and shifting things around, okay? But I'm not getting into the third loop in this one. There's just not enough time, okay? By the way, we're probably gonna run over time here. So if you can stay, great. So creating congruency. In every experience, we have something physically happening, we have something happening on the emotional level, and then we're thinking, all right? You may say one word, you may have a choice of a couple facial expressions and a few physical gestures. You might have a choice of several emotions, but then for your several emotions, you're going to have 100 more thoughts, all right? In each moment, we end up with one thought, one feeling, one action, one word, for example, okay? It all crystallizes. But if you work backwards, what's behind the word? What's behind the gesture? There's probably a couple emotions. What's behind that? Several thoughts. And then what's behind that? Lots of potential, all right? So what I mean by essence is our higher experience or our more infinite mind, or you can call it your higher self. Maybe you call it intuition. If we are not congruent in thought, emotion, and physicality, there becomes a distortion and nothing from essence can come through. It gets blocked. This is why we move back and forth between awareness and experience, so that there's an alignment and we can access deeper experiences and more creative and intuitive thinking. Is that making sense? That's how we can access source. When everything lines up, then source can start pouring through into us, all right? And in fact, when we're thinking on quantum level, we are flashing in and out of existence. That red dot represents what I'm experiencing now, this moment, okay? And it's an expression coming from source, moving through my higher self, into my thoughts, into my emotions, and into my physicality, into the final word choice I made. It crystallized into this moment. What EED is doing, it's working that way, but it can also work the other way, taking an action, a thought, a feeling, and then dialing it back into the more essential place and accessing source. And this is, again, where the transformation is happening, so that the next moment we can recrystallize in a different way, and the next moment in a different way. And in fact, in holographic models of thinking or of the universe, we're constantly flashing in and out of existence like a film strip. You have one frame and then a little blank space, and then another frame and another blank space. And as we move through time, it gives us the illusion of motion, when in fact it's flash, 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 flash. We're able, when we're operating on a quantum level, we're flashing in and out of existence. And what we're doing is we're letting go of the rigidity to go back into those gaps and rearrange ourselves and then flash back into existence. How are you guys doing with that information? Any comments or questions? Feel free to disagree as well.
I'm really understanding the alignment and the congruency, and I see how it can help us in being more in the presence.
Yes.
And I'm a little bit lost with or not lost, but I wonder if I'm coming back from the source, I can actually change everything in an instance.
Yes. Yes.
And
It can
that
rearrange instantly, but there must, and I'm not saying it's easy to do. It takes discipline, okay? This is where reconciliation comes in, because a lot of times we're very attached to the same red dot in the same way.
yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, we are so attached from of the point we are turning back, so
That's
we
right.
cannot take the leap.
That's right.
Yeah.
This is another reason why we want to build resilience, so we can drop into dream level and access source, so that that dot can rearrange itself differently, meaning I can let go of certain preferences and judgments because I'm no longer associating it with my identity.
Attachment again.
That's right. So EED is a practical way of facilitating a letting go of attachments.
Oh, thanks God.
Is that making sense now a little bit more?
Yeah. Now it makes sense, because I couldn't see how, and because I now understand why it's so clear.
Yeah. So without resilience, without an alignment and congruency, the change isn't really going to happen. We might get a temporary bending of reality, but it's going to snap back to its rigidity. Okay. Again, that's if we're trying to transform from the story and game level. It's like trying to push a big boulder up a hill. Okay. But when you drop in a dream or source, that boulder suddenly becomes formless and weightless, and we can place it anywhere, and it becomes effortless. Do you understand? And then we come back into rigid reality. The boulder is now transmuted. It's different. It's in a different place, but it's because we went to this other level, okay? The quantum level. It might sound very Buddhistic or crazy, but it's, I mean, I've been working with this for 12 years and I'm having consistent results, okay? And this is what all mystics are talking about, but we're putting it in practical terms. All right. Now, so how do you listen so that you can start getting beyond those rigid levels, okay? So here's some levels of awareness. Me, I'm focused on myself. That's going to seal me in my bubble. I'm sensing myself. Everything I'm seeing around me filters back into my bubble of reality. I can then start focusing on you, okay? I can put my awareness over there, but still I'm using myself as a point of reference. So I'm sensing you back in relation to me, all right? This is why we call it egocentric, because I'm still processing everything through me. Then I can sense what's around me, my global awareness, but again, it's me making sense of the world. I'm still in a fixed point of me with the world. Then the fourth level is relationship awareness, meaning what's going on between you and I. And this is where we start becoming aware of the game, okay? It's in this level of the relationship dynamic that we start to see games being played. On these first three levels, we're really only going to be reinforcing our own story a lot, okay? And playing our games through these levels, all right? A lot of psychology, a lot of coaching, they really just talk about the first three levels: me, you, and environment, okay? Very few are talking about what's in between us, meaning what are the dynamics, okay? And EED breaks that down into 7 distinct elements, all right? But then we go beyond. We go into levels of transpersonal awareness, meaning now it's beyond myself. This is where I'm no longer having a central fixed point. This is where it gets quantum, because now it's demanding non-locality, meaning I have to move my central awareness outside of myself. And that first level is what's emerging, what's bubbling up. And that can bubble up from anywhere. It could bubble up from within me, but within you, the relationship, the environment. So I have to move my awareness outside of myself to sense what is coming up. The next one is, what is the origin or the original impulse? So somebody can have this behavior like they're very aggressive, they're yelling, they're screaming on the surface, that can threaten me. But if I'm going into the source origin, oh, this person is coming from frustration or actually passion or actually love, and it's being expressed in a distorted way where it's now anger and aggression and bullying. Do you understand? Or so you're going beyond the obvious behavior, and you're sensing into what is the origin of what's happening. Then the next level is to do with environment, but it's about how is everything interconnecting. This is synchronicities, interconnections, systems awareness, where everything is interrelated and working together and following these fractal patterns. This is where you start seeing the order coming out of the chaos, okay? The last level awareness is meta-awareness, which is all previous 7 at once. You're freely moving yourself between me, you, environment, relationship dynamic, what's emerging, what's the source, what's all the interconnections. And this is the level of awareness we're training as a facilitator or a coach or a leader. It's cultivating the ability to access this meta-awareness so that you're cultivating a sense of omnipresence. This is what helps reconcile the idea of, yes, I'm influencing, I'm being influenced, but I can also lead, coach, or facilitate from non-interference. Okay, what's creating interference is when I'm leading from my ego bubble, okay? When I start entering these transpersonal areas, I'm not having a fixed agenda of what must be transformed or how it will be transformed. I'm working with it, and I'm allowing it to influence me just as much as I'm influencing it. Is this making sense for you guys? So it's focusing or cultivating these upper levels of awareness that are allowing you to already enter quantum experiences or a quantum way of thinking, because they're non-local. They're not fixed inside yourself. Again, it requires you to open your bubble to be able to do this. All right? Any questions or comments there?
For me, it has a lot of sense because I'm trained in NLP,
Yeah.
and
NLP, yeah.
NLP, yes, and it's explicitly form of understanding a lot of things. It's simpler, it seems to me. And I just put down something you said about the fourth position in the egocentric explanation about 7 distinct elements that are between the 2 parts in the relationship.
Yes.
Can you briefly name the?
I can't. I mean, we're already almost at the hour mark here. I can briefly mention it, but in previous webinars, we've worked through those 7 elements.
I will go back to that.
And what this is doing is, this is describing elements of the game. How can you recognize game? All right.
Yeah. Elements
mainly
of the game are.
Action, energy, and status. All right, and then that creates a polarity, and then there's going to be a role, archetype, and a story that help support that game. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So now we're going to look at the brain and how this also can put us in a fixed or a fluid reality. All right. So first off, we have left and right brain. Okay. So left brain is particle oriented, meaning it sees lots of dots. Okay. It's linear, meaning ABC 1, 2, 3. It's linear logic. Okay, it follows things in sequences. It is time segmented or time dependent, meaning it's looking at past, present, future, all right? And it is very critical, meaning it's analyzing, navigating, organizing. It's critiquing everything so that it knows where to categorize and put things, all right? Is that making sense? Okay, that's your logical brain. The right brain is, in a way, quite opposite. It's holistic oriented. It sees whole pictures, the whole thing. And because it can see the whole thing, it's not understanding things in logical sequences. Okay, so it can be alinear, meaning everything just fits together as it fits together. There's no such thing as order, all right? So it's thinking in circles and curves and spirals, okay? So this is where your holistic brain, your right brain, can recognize fractals and patterns because it's seeing the whole thing, whereas your left brain is zoomed in on one little particle at a time, okay? It has a sense of timelessness, meaning it's constantly living in the now. Now, 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 now. And it's not connecting past, present, and future together, all right? And the other thing about the right brain is it's highly receptive, meaning it's accepting everything. Okay, so the left brain can take the pictures from the right brain and organize them, okay? The right brain can, the left brain can also be the guardian or gateway before anything influences the right brain. This is why it's critical, okay? It's judging, okay? What preserves my survival and identity? Because if I let everything in, the right brain is just gonna take it and use it. It's going to believe everything. So in a way, the right brain is gullible, naive. And this is, so the both are working together. Now, if we overuse the left brain, we're going to lose the whole picture. We're not going to be able to connect the dots, okay? But if we're only right brain, then you're going to go, you know, you're going to walk up to a big hungry lion and just say, wow, my friend. And then it eats you, making sense, okay? What we want to do is bridge the two together. And so again, that awareness experience loop is also moving us between a linear experience and a linear experience. You know, we're working with straight lines and angles as well as curves, okay, and spirals. So we want to counterbalance between creative thinking and critical thinking, all right? How are you guys doing with this? Now, we also have a front and a back. So, and they're in a way similar. In the back, your amygdala, you have your reptilian brain. Again, it's based upon survival. It's extremely fast, but what makes it fast is it's rigid. It's driven by fear and it's constantly reactive. So it's acting before you're even thinking, okay? Like if you're driving in the car, and then suddenly your foot slams on the brake before you realize that somebody stepped out in front of the road. Okay, that is your reptilian brain at work. Okay, or suddenly all the hair is up on the back of your neck and you're ready, you're alert, you're ready to run because you're under threat. It's perceiving things before you're conscious of it, okay? The frontal lobe is more spacious, therefore it's a little, in a way, slower. Okay, and this is your conscious, deductive thinking, etc. It's where you're more lucid. Your reptilian brain is acting sooner than the frontal lobe, okay? It is resilient, it's lucid, okay? This is where you can, so what we're doing is we can override or calm the reptilian brain down to say, before I go on the attack, what really is going on, okay? So your reptilian brain is going to cover your survival and self-preservation, you know, so that it has you acting when you're under threat. But it's driven by fear. Now, in society, we've been conditioned to be very left-brained, and it's constantly over-activating our reptilian brain because we're constantly bombarded with fear and threat and identity crisis. Does this make sense, what I'm saying? And we're not really encouraged to relax into resilience or spaciousness or think creatively. That's actually getting shut down. So the left and the back are getting overworked. And this is what's keeping us in story and game, okay? And the reptilian brain is basically based on polarity, okay? And so those four you got 4 basic behaviors where it's running from danger. It's either going to flee, or it's going to search for safe territory, or it's going to cling to safe territory, or it's going to fight the danger. Okay. The 5th one, freeze, is where it's a little bit like flee, where it's not going to move at all on that polarity spectrum. It's going to try and stop the swing altogether and pretend like it's hidden. Okay, that's the freeze. All right. We have a whole other webinar on polarity and how that works. Okay. So our reptilian brain is binary oriented, and it's really just concerned with safety, danger. Now, our frontal lobe works well with the right brain because it's resilient, it's holistic, okay? And this is what EED is also trying to promote us to use, okay? So more of a flow in our vertical flow and alignment, and then to start flowing in relationship with more receptivity and resilience, all right? Now, what I must say is we're actually getting all 4 to work together because none are better than the other, is what I want to say. We enter a quantum experience when we've got all 4 sections flowing with each other, okay? How are you doing with that information? Again, this is moving from game into dream, okay? Game and dream, game and dream, game and dream. So the more we train access into our right brain and our frontal lobe, while still allowing ourselves to have our left brain and our reptilian brain, that is where we're going to have more expanded consciousness, okay? Any questions or comments there? Again, this is what we're training you right from the first module, is doing at least these 2 dimensions of brain experience, okay? Now, there's a 3rd dimension, which is a more, well, here's a, okay, so it's the vertical axis. So here's another way to think of resilience and reptilian. I call it the pathetic self because it's about strategies, pathos, drama, pathologies, okay? And it's also very self-indulgent. The only difference between a pathetic self and a resilient self is that they both want to take action, but one is connected to source, the other is disconnected from source. So when it's driven by a disconnect, it's driven by emptiness, which means it's driven by fear, which means it's reactive. This pathetic self is what's activating the reptilian brain, okay? A resilient self has connection to source, therefore it can be creative and it never feels under threat. So this is more coming from, say, frontal lobe and being holistic, all right? Now, you could call the pathetic self your saboteur, your gremlin, your limited thinking, whatever, okay? Now, what EED is doing is it's first saying, of course, these pathetic selves are here. They both show up at the same time. It's like 2 sides of the same coin. But we're saying, first, orient yourself towards resilience as a first training and reconnect that resilient self back to source so that we have a flow going between resilient self and source. What happens is if the resilient self, it's coming from source and then goes and takes action, it risks disconnecting under fear, challenge, or anything, and it can become a pathetic self. So before we take action, we plug it back into source and then reactivate it and send it into action. This is a key to sustainable action, is build resilience, plug it into source, and then take action. I've got a whole other webinar discussing that process, okay? What we want to do is first start reorienting ourselves to move our thinking and perceptions from pathetic to resilient. Then once we start getting good with that, it's because we're so hardwired to go into pathetic self, problem thinking, okay? Resilience, first, this is again why I say go to resilience first. It will find the solutions. Then as a next stage, we want them reconciling each other, because the pathetic self will see all the cracks in the wall. It just cannot fix the cracks because it sees it as a problem. The resilient self can fix all the cracks in the wall, but it also could leave them because it's so resilient. It says it doesn't matter if there's cracks or not in the wall. It doesn't even care if the wall will crumble because it knows it will survive. But when you get them working together, pathetic self as the problem identifier, and then the resilient self as the mindset for creative solution, right? The pathetic self gives the resilient self a reason to create. And the resilient self takes care of the stress that the pathetic self can experience when it finds every crack in the wall. How are you guys doing with this information? It's another way of thinking game, dream. Resilient self is representing that dream fluidity, and the pathetic self is representing that rigid, fixed game reality. Any questions or comments?
It makes sense. It's clear.
Mm-hmm.
As with my left brain, I completely understand it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's I I will uh, use my awareness to
Yes.
see how, when I'm going from the resilient self to the pathetic self,
Yeah.
and to be just being aware, you can make the shift.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
One of the easiest ways is really, because pathetic self and resilient self can behave exactly the same way. It's more of where they're coming from. So the pathetic self will be driven by fear, emptiness, desperation, need, obligation, okay? It's a conditional way of being. I must ask for the promotion. What if they say no? No, 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 I'll fight for that promotion. I'm a warrior. I can do it. So whereas the resilient self will say, oh, if I don't get the promotion, I'll find something else. It's okay. So the basic difference is, am I okay? You try to take it away, and am I still okay? Does that make sense, what I'm saying? The pathetic self believes if it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, it will cease to exist. The resilient self says, I'm just doing it because I can.
yeah, and it seems so important not to be stuck in one of them.
Right.
Just to use both in order to have the balance.
That's right. That's right. So when we take you through EED trainings, you'll recognize pathetic self, but we're doing a hard focus over to resilience first, because it's the one, and source, because it's the one thing we've been trained less in, right? Then by our third module, we're now reconciling pathetic self and resilient self together, all right? Our second module deals with entirely pathetic self, how to work directly with it, all right? So, but this is our first training, is activating this resilient self, plugging into source and activating action from source and resilience, entering that dream level, okay? Okay. Then there's this vertical axis, a third dimension of intelligence, which means accessing heart level and gut level intelligence, and then reconciling them together. Because normally we think that the brain is our center of experience, but the heart can also be the center of our experience, and so can the gut. So if anyone does need to leave, you can leave, all right? I know, Miriam, you're saying you have to leave. That's fine. I always program too much. I'm only going to go another maybe couple minutes here, okay?
Sorry, I really need to leave. I have other commitments.
That's fine, and you'll receive a recording, okay?
Awesome. Great food for thought.
Awesome. So what we're doing here is we're reconciling these centers together. Now, in our webinar, Ending the Victim Cycle, we talk about this in much more detail, all right? But once we find a resilient center of experience, it doesn't matter where it is, and we start doing a flow of energy throughout the body, then the brain is less in control, okay? It's calming down that reptilian brain. It's opening our frontal lobe. We're balancing a whole brain experience, and we're allowing heart and power to make its way in as well. And so all of these centers are becoming aligned and resilient. In module 2, we talk about these centers more specifically, but our head or brain is really about self-preservation. This is why it's egocentric. It's about the fear impulse, dealing with that, safety, danger. The heart is more about connection. It wants validation. It's going for unity. It's capable of unity and love, okay? On the game level, it's gonna manipulate and try to win love. But in the source level, it's gonna be the center of unity consciousness. And in the lower gut is where we have drive and action and movement, and where we work with territory and community. On a game level, it's going to do power plays, and it's going to control, and it'll bully, and it'll kill to survive. But on the dream and source level, it's creating foundation and stability, a connection to earth, all right, and expansion. It's creating solidity. It's creating the vulnerable invulnerability. Is this making sense? Where it doesn't need to use its power to control existence, it already is existing.
Yeah, it's like the same. It replicates the energies inside in these three centers are replicating the fight games from
That's right.
outside
That's
in
right.
the relationship.
Yes.
And if you are using the same resources inside,
yeah,
it's the alignment you need to you want to have.
That's right.
Yeah.
What we mostly experience nowadays is we've emphasized the brain so much.
Yeah.
There's been conditioning to cut out the heart. In corporate world, the gut center is over promoted. Okay, the power plays. Mm-hmm. Then there's this new liberal movement where it's all heart. Let's cut off the head and let's cut out the gut, right? So none of them are getting along.
Yeah.
All right. So the heart is creating connection and relationship. The gut is creating power and drive. Okay.
Yeah.
When we can reconcile them together, then it's possible to have power and still be generous and loving. It's possible to be generous and loving without losing power and control. Okay. But we need to move into that dream and source level in order to reconcile that together. And then that can rise up into our intelligence and further inform the brain of what choices can we make, all right, and still survive. So the third thing we're doing in EED is doing an interior reconciliation, which also creates, like you said, an exterior reconciliation, so that it's not just power and validation games, okay?
Yeah.
That's game level coming from the gut or from the heart.
Yeah.
In dream and source, we're entering a unity consciousness. All right?
Yeah.
And this is what we call the resilience loop, or the vertical loop, is where we get you in touch with resilience, and then we start circulating that. And we go beyond where we're going to use, not just circulate the energy in your body, but plug you into the earth and plug you into the sky around you. And this gives you context of where am I using my resilience. I am interconnecting with the earth, which provides foundation and vitality and rootedness, and then the upper levels of the divine aspects of ourselves, which would be, you know, spirit, higher consciousness, higher awareness, or just collective consciousness. All right.
Yeah, you are out of your bubble.
Yeah, it's another way of opening the bubble in the vertical sense. Okay. Our bubbles are attracted to earth energy on lower course energies, being more animal. And when we're in our bubble, we're also aspiring towards higher energies, which is divinity. Okay, so you can have divine intelligence, and you can have root vitality. All right.
Yeah.
But when we have resilient energy and we start bringing the earth and the sky in, okay, then we're shifting it into having an open bubble in our entire environment. Again, that's opening a quantum mind, okay, because that's creating that 7th level of cosmic awareness where everything now is interconnected. We're interconnecting ourselves from resilience.
Yes.
How are you doing with that?
Yes, I couldn't understand why the word resilience, it has, I always forget the meaning of resilience. And I keep going back to the dictionary and and it is because it's never satisfying me, the definitions, and I don't, but now I start to understand it in a different way.
How are you understanding it now, the resilience?
It's, I can say it, harmony and unity.
Okay.
And it's not about me. It's not about fighting. It's about harmony.
Okay. So what I'm going to say is that's a result
It's
of accessing resilience, harmony, and unity. What resilience actually is, or I'm going a level underneath that. So resilience comes from connection to a source, the all potential, infinite awareness. From there, because we're connected to a sense of permanence and timelessness, all potential, and infinite awareness, right? Then we're also connected to core vitality, life force, will to live, which gives us flexibility and adaptability. And that's our ability to bounce back and even to recreate ourselves despite what happens, meaning I cannot be destroyed.
Yeah.
This is more the sense of resilience. When I have a feeling of, yes, it's a state of being. Then when I'm connected to that and it's circulating through me as a direct experience, then naturally I will be more harmonious, more cooperative, and I will feel more at one
the
with
result.
them.
Yes, yes,
That's why I say it's a result.
Yeah.
Does that make
sense?
to you?
Yes, it makes sense. It makes sense. It makes sense.
Makes sense. And in other webinars, we're talking about, okay, what is it to access essence? But basically, it's, like I said, nowhere to go, nothing to do, nothing to be. It's a self-generating, self-perpetual, and unconditional state of being. It's not dependent on other things or others. That's when we're at source or essence.
Yes.
It's self-generating. And the main essential qualities are peace, unity, love, and limitlessness. And we'll migrate in any of those qualities. And there's actually 10, but those are the 4 main, because the others are just variations of those 4.
Okay.
So, and this is what the next webinar is going to focus on much more. So I'm just going to go through it really quickly. If we enter dream state or dream level, and then we start to engage in relationship, we can drop ourselves and relationship into that source level essence to essence unity. It takes activating our own resilience first and then expanding our concept into that, our loop into sky and earth, so that we're actually having a much more massive field of resilience within ourselves, also being connected to what's around us. Okay, so we're not in isolation feeling resilient. Okay, that's why it's important to add earth, sky. When that gets charged up, then naturally we're going to want to radiate that same energy or quality we're experiencing. Meaning we're going to want to give that energy and the other person will receive it. Okay. Naturally, they may not be open to receive it at first. We just give. If they don't receive it, we give again. If they don't receive it, we give again. But we're remaining in our resilient state. They will start to mirror it. And once they start receiving, it starts activating their resilient state as well. That will charge them up and they're going to start giving and receiving as well. And then because you're opening yourself to earth and sky, they start to mirror that as well. All right. And then this is what unity consciousness looks like, is that there's a free give and receive. Energy is just being passed back and forth on the horizontal and the vertical. And it's passing between the 2 human beings, but also all through the environment. And so what happens is the idea of an identity disappears. It's just two localities exchanging and sharing energy, but the awareness is flowing all through. So imagine, add that omnipresence and meta awareness while flowing this energy. This is where real reconciliation can take place, because we realize there really is no difference, but we can hold lots of diversity. I am you, you are me, we are unity. And we're at one with the world around us. So that's ultimately where we go with EED, is cultivating these kinds of experiences. And this happens in our advanced modules, in our reconciling conflict course, for example.
Yes.
And this, from the quantum experience, does not take long. It just takes discipline of mind. And it actually gets activated faster when we facilitate it through those two simple loops of action, response, awareness, experience, with a focus and orientation towards resilience. And we can achieve this quite quickly. I get people in this state within 10, 15 minutes.
After 12 years of practice.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. And I get my participants, they're able to enter this in not that much longer of a time. Maybe they don't sustain it as long, but they'll have glimpses of this. They'll drop into it. And then I'm training you how to facilitate having them sustain it, okay? Especially if you're thinking of leading or facilitating or even coaching. But right from the first module, we get you into this state. You know how to coach or facilitate this state in yourself and in someone else. In the later modules, we start creating these horizontal experiences where you're into the unity consciousness. You're experiencing this by module 3 and definitely facilitating this in the Reconciling Conflicts course.
Yeah.
I will speak more about this in the next webinar as well, breaking this down.
Yeah, it's the most valuable time I spent in time. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So the idea is that we can toggle between these levels: game, dream, source, dream, game. Like, there's nothing wrong with the game, but when we're able to access dream and source, the games become more creative and masterful, and we can master ourselves through the game. This is what's alleviating the suffering, is by having a fluidity into dream and source level and coming back into our games, playing it with less life and death circumstance.
Yeah, I suppose we are coming back to the game more resourceful.
Much more resourceful and much more conscious and aware.
Yes, yes. And
and more peace. Therefore, then we don't have to avoid conflict or confrontation. We don't have to obligate ourselves to always be nice people, right? It's okay to be angry at someone and creative. It's okay to love someone and feel intimate and close, right? Without feeling under threat or obligation. That's when we add in the dream and source level, we're neutralizing fear and threat and obligation and need.
Yeah.
And we can still play these games, because every game provides a lesson. We can learn, which will bring out new strengths in ourselves when we learn the lesson.
Yeah.
So 2 simple tools is to toggle between game and dream, is toggle between pathetic self, resilient self. Keep orienting towards connecting to source. And then also to flow from resilience and give and receive generously from resilience. And don't get upset if it gets cut off. Just return back to orientation. Just keep reconnecting to resilience, keep reconnecting to source, and then keep flowing. And every time you or they jump back into game, it's fine, because then you know how to re-enter here. As soon as you know how to re-enter into dream level, that's all you need to focus on. You don't need to fix them. You drop.
Yeah.
And this is about repetition, repetition, repetition. It's a free toggling back and forth. And when we're allowing ourselves to do that, That's when we're opening up this quantum experience where we're able to embrace paradox, where we're able to feel a sense of timelessness, but still move through linear time.
Yeah, it just came to my mind the moment when we are forcing the other to open his bubble.
Yeah, you can't.
And
it won't happen.
yeah. And this way, with giving and receiving, it's the way.
That's right.
Not forcing.
Drop yourself first, and they will start to mirror. And then when
Yes.
they close, you're going to mirror that too. You'll close. The point is if you can train more conscious awareness and then creative will to decide where are we going. And the more
Yeah.
resilient you become, you'll even decide, fine, I'll play the game.
Yeah.
I'm not obligated to always move into dream and source.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what fluidity is, right? Moving between the levels on the vertical and horizontal axis.
Yeah.
So just a basic summary. And then, are you okay for another couple minutes?
Yeah. Sorry for keeping you so long, so with so many questions and.
No, it's me. I always overprogram these webinars. So
it's okay.
So to move beyond game level, listen and respond to actions, behavior, and energy. Okay, rather than words, feeling, and narrative, because words, feelings, and narrative keep you in that story mindset, that linear binary experience of good, bad, right, wrong. Okay.
Yeah.
And to keep that flow, then just keep counterbalancing within them and yourself that awareness experience. So you're creating an alignment while you're creating a flow of action response. So you're acting and reacting to their behaviors and their energies, not what they say. Okay?
Yeah.
Because that's when we get caught up into verbal and emotional manipulation.
Yes, behind the words.
Looking behind the words.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So what helps you being able to do that is connect with your own experience of resilience. So you're getting beyond having rigid or reactive responses to things. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Simple question you can ask yourself is, so for whatever's going on here, am I dead yet? Is it killing me? How am I still okay, even though I don't like what's happening?
I have a question.
Yeah.
What this is costing me?
Well, that's going to take you into fear-based mindset.
Yes, you're right.
How did you tell? How did you feel that through?
It's okay. It's a level of awareness I reached.
Okay.
It helped me in certain situations.
Yep, it can. So that's not a bad question, but if that's the first question you ask yourself, you're going to aggravate your sense of disconnection and emptiness, which is going to take you into the fear-based reactivity. Yeah. What is this costing me? Oh, I'm feeling the gap, right? What's missing, okay?
Mm-hmm,
Whereas if I say, even though this might be costing me a lot, who knows? How am I still okay? That's going to take me to the resilience, which means despite the cost, despite the suffering, how am I still alive? That takes me to vitality and the life force.
Yes.
If I plug into the resilience then once resilient, I can say, and so now how important is this for me? And what is it costing me? You'll have a different answer.
Yeah, because what is costing me, it's the reverse of how am I still alive? It's like it's your question. It's orienting me toward resources.
Yes.
And the question, what is that cost me? It's about lack of resources.
That's
it's
right.
the opposite.
That's right. It's leading you to lack,
Yeah.
scarcity, emptiness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And even a question like, okay, so what are my values here? Not recommended, because values can still be driven by a game. Whereas source resilience has nothing to do with anything. It has nothing to do with identity. Values can get controlled by ego and identity.
Different roles, different.
Values are a product of source and resilience, but there also can be a product of the emptiness and fear. Okay, so rather just go to basic resilience. So what's something nobody can ever take away? Mm-hmm. How am I still alive? Am I dead yet? If not, what is keeping me alive? Like, what is my spark of life here? Okay. Mm-hmm. But the basic resilience question is, how am I still okay, despite all? Okay. To gain fluidity, it starts with acceptance and fascination, along with connecting to a sense of resilience. And it's the humility of self that already starts to open the bubble, because it takes some humility to be willing to be influenced. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's what enables us to let go of clinging to a rigid position. If we feel resilience, we start to calm down. We start to be open, have a little humility where we don't need to control what's going on, but we'll flow with it. Then we can begin a generous give and receive without manipulation.
Yeah.
Okay. This I didn't get to talk about much, but this is about right brain. So that your left brain wants everything A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, linear binary. Whereas when you start adding in quantum or right brain, holistic, okay, remember working in spirals. Mm-hmm. Think of multiple things can happen at once, but they might, to your left brain, seem very different from each other, when actually they're all interconnected. Mm-hmm. So one way we train you on how to work is about convergence, where multiple things can converge at once. All right. So if you use the metaphor of putting a puzzle together, just work. You don't have to put the frame first, and then this section, and then this section, and this section.
That's a strategy.
Yeah, that's a linear strategy. Yeah. Whereas scatter all your pieces, find certain pieces that fit, and start building clusters, and then they start to naturally connect themselves. That's more what convergence is. Mm-hmm. So you're going back and forth between linear and logical, and then alinear and holistic. All right. And that's what's going to help you activate more whole brain activity. Mm-hmm. Let the pieces of the puzzle find themselves, as opposed to you trying to control it.
Yeah.
You learn this. It takes a while. And just remember, you don't need to push for transformation, because both the question and the answer are contained in the moment. It's more of get in flow with the question, and it'll start revealing its layers. All right. And so then as it reveals its layers, it's revealing its solutions as well. And what we teach you is, it's not about how much time it takes to reveal the solution. It's always there. It's more, and you can't get lost, because all roads lead to Rome. There's a million possibilities how to get from question to answer. So what we're really doing is we're mastering how to get there most efficiently and cleanly. It's not about how fast.
Yeah.
All right. And that you really can never get lost. So even when you're confused, you take a step back and stop controlling things. Again, flow with the moment. And with the tools and structures we're giving you, you'll be able to recognize those core patterns, and they all converge. Again, it's working with convergence rather than linear sequence.
Yeah.
So when you can see things as interrelated and synchronous, meaning they're in sync and there's synchronicity, okay, they're affecting each other. When you see everything as interrelated, as opposed to being separate and accidental, you're already entering a quantum mind. So again, back to the first thing, you're working with actions, behavior, and energy. So look at trends and patterns or actions. Don't listen to stories and testimonies.
Yeah.
What's happening above is happening below. What's happening on the outside is happening on the inside. It's all fractal based. Everything happens in patterns. So rather than listening to stories, look at actions, trends, and patterns. And this will help you uncover deeper levels of truth.
Yeah.
So what are you taking away in general?
Oh my God. Everything. There are a lot of things I heard in your work today.
Okay.
And um, this listening behind the story and seeing the game and choosing to go in the dream state.
Yes.
And the decision to open my bubble. That's
Yes.
that's these are the three main things that
Excellent.
seems to me really important now. And listening again, I suppose I will see more than this, but at this moment, this seems to me somehow a key.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It definitely is a key. And one thing that really stands out is making the decision to open the bubble. There's no obligation. It's simply a decision.
Yes, a choice.
It's a choice. And once you learn how to create flow through action response and access resilience, which is quite simple with practice,
Yeah.
you start making those choices. It's very easy.
And the fascination.
With the
Because
fascination.
this is that helps.
Yeah.
That it's like, as you said, it's instantly making the shift from fighting to really be in the flow and behind the game and the words.
That's right. A little bit of acceptance goes a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what actually starts opening the bubble and creating that fluidity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in previous webinars, we've walked through what we call the 8 stages of truthful relationship, from recognition to acceptance, fascination, and then it moves into appreciation, enjoyment, engagement, participation, and then co-creation. So that's what helps us sustain that dream fluidity. If we just recognize, judge, and act, we're closing our bubble because we're creating from non-acceptance.
Yeah.
And acceptance just means it is what it is. Nothing to change yet. Just get to know it from a resilient place.
Yeah.
And explore. Awesome.
Oh, yes, awesome.
Yes. So our next webinar is going to be on Monday, December 2nd, and it's a continuation of this.
Okay.
Restoring resilience in relationships. Okay, so we're talking in more detail about how to open the bubble, how we're affecting other people, how to maintain that dream and source flow and unity consciousness. Right?
Yeah. I'll be here.
Awesome. Yes.
Yes.
And the registration's already open. Go back to the same website, EED-webinars-2019.
Yeah.
.eventbrite.com.
Okay.
And then we got more modules coming up at the end of the year. And we'll be shortly putting out our 2020 schedule, but next modules wouldn't be until March, April in Europe. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. It would
Excellent.
be a perfect time for me.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Christina. And thank
so
you
much,
to
Troy.
those of you that were listening to the recording. Thank you. And also thank you to Miriam, who had to leave a little bit early. Or actually, I went late. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Troy.
Thank you so much, Christina, and have an awesome day.
Thank you.